Okay, so I have pasted a link to the meeting minutes on the chat if you haven't seen it yet. Maybe like while more people are joining, we can like go through quickly the like meeting etiquette. Let's say like basically copy paste of what's going on in Cluster API, right? Let me share my screen. Okay, so if you want to like add a point or like add a comment to some of the discussion, please use the raise hand feature, and then like you will be given the opportunity to talk. If you want to access the document and to edit it, please make sure that you are in the Metal3 Dev Google group. The link is right there. So join the group if you are not yet there, so that you can then add your name in the list of attending people. And if you have something you want to add to the agenda, please add it as a point while we are going through. And please mute yourself if you are not talking. That will be very helpful. Yeah. Okay, so let's maybe get started. The first thing we could go through is like maybe an introduction round of the participants that are in this meeting, because I guess for some of us it's the first time that we are meeting. So we can go through the list of attending people, or yeah, to make sure that we're going in order. So please add your name there if you're not there yet, and then when it's your turn, like you can give us a short description.
Please mute.
Yep. Okay, so let me start. So I'm Mael. I'm a developer in Ericsson. Like we're working on cloud platform, like using Kubernetes and deploying now in bare metal environment. That's why we are interested in Metal3. Is Sudip on the call? Okay, Pedro?
Hello, I'm working from Red Hat, so I'm part of the community team of Metal3, so we are writing some blog posts and trying to collaborate in the community events, being in the pool, doing some talks. Thank you for organizing this community meeting. So next one.
Digambar here.
Hi, that would be me. This is Pep. I'm also from Red Hat in the same team as Pedro. We are part of the ecosystem team, so we work on several Kubernetes infrastructure-related projects. One of them is Metal3, and yeah, we try to help on that. Dan, you're next.
Hello, my name is Dan Finneran. I'm part of Heptio/VMware. I've been part of some of the cluster API stuff that's been taking place for a little while now, with a focus on kind of bare metal provisioning.
Okay, next one.
Hi, I'm Mukesh Dua. I'm working as a solution architect with AT&T for the network cloud that AT&T is building.
Okay, Sandhya on the call.
Yeah, hi, I'm Digambar Patil, working with Dell. We are proposing new feature for validation in Metal3.
Hey, good morning, guys. This is Anand Varada from AT&T, same team as Mukesh Dua in solution engineering team for Network Cloud.
Hi, folks. This is Anil Maheshwari. I work for Ericsson, and we design a private cloud using Kubernetes and OpenStack.
Hi, this is Sudeep Batra. I'm also with Anil Maheshwari from Ericsson, working with the Airship AT&T Airship community developed software, and we intend to use the bare metal provider Metal3 as part of Airship. Thank you.
Hi there. Well, my name is Juan Parrilla. I'm leading the end-to-end integration team for edge computing on Red Hat. Well, let's do this. Next.
This is Niket Parekh from Ericsson, working with Sudeep and Anil on same solution for AT&T to deliver network cloud.
मेल ये वो है जिसके साथ कवर काम करता है मेल अभी ज्वाइन नहीं किया तुमने टेंशन ना ले ज्वाइन कर
If you're like, please keep yourself muted if you're not active. Nice. Next one.
Hello, this is Jan Tilles. I'm also working here in Ericsson, same team with Mile.
Hello, this is Dmitry Yukov. I'm from Mirantis. We're working together with the AT&T team to extend the Metal Cube and to contribute to Metal Cube as well. Thank you.
Okay, is there still someone?
I'm Shanti Thermopalan. I'm also with Ericsson, working on the network cloud project. Thank you.
Okay, let's hope we have solved this problem with the sound. Is there still someone who didn't introduce themselves and want to do it now?
Yeah, sure. I'm Steve Hardy from Red Hat. Sorry, I joined a bit late. But yeah, I've been working with Russell and several others to help bootstrap the Metal Cube effort. And I've also been working on the OpenShift integration of the Metal Cube components.
Hey everybody, I'm Russell Bryant. I work for Red Hat. I helped start this project, and happy to have our first meeting and meet you all. Thanks.
Hi guys, this is Arvinder. I work for AT&T. I'm a developer there.
Hey guys, I'm Ian Howell. I work for AT&T on the Network Cloud and Airship projects.
Okay, well then, if that's all, welcome everybody. And it's interesting to see how this community is shaping up lots of AT&T, Ericsson, and Red Hat people. So the next topic then will probably be about the meeting times, like for this community meeting, like how frequently do we want to meet, and we should probably agree on some kind of regular, let's say, schedule. So there was a first proposal that was talked about in KubeCon, if I recall correctly, about having a meeting every other week. we could also do it like every week or like every month, depending on how frequently you think this type of meeting is needed. So we could probably like write, like I'm going to write the two proposals, the three proposals actually. So every week, every other week, and every month. And please add like whether you, which one you support by adding a +1 on top of after the proposal that is okay for you. So that's for the frequency. And about the time, so the time could remain the same as this meeting's time if everybody's okay okay with this. Otherwise, like please like let us know that if there's a problem. Okay, didn't see any reactions there, so let's maybe move on with the next topic. We could like go through like the different work items that are ongoing in Metal3 to see like a bit what every partner is like working on. So
hey Neil, this is Sudeep. Just one comment. Is it possible to like postpone, like make it 1 hour later the meeting?
Sure. Let's in the doodle the time, the preferred time was this one. So yeah, how to we could like propose this postponing by an hour the same way here, and then let people vote on like keeping it on the same time or postponing by an hour, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let me just put the two proposals here. Okay, just notice that an hour later will probably be conflicting, at least for the airship community, with one of their meetings, right? So let's see.
Okay.
Any comment? Okay, well then, let's move on if it's okay for everybody. So the round of work items, please add like what you are working on in this list, and add your name also in front of it so that we can identify who proposed a specific work item, right? So I can start with what is going on in Ericsson related to the CapBM. So we are mainly working on the V1 Alpha 2 implementation for CapBM. Right now, the code is pretty much there for the controller. We are still working on cleaning it a bit so that then we can like make a pull request towards the master. But some other works we've been starting around and that would be really interesting to discuss with the community is about the like pivoting first, that we are trying to move the different components from the ephemeral node into the target node, and hitting some issues with the bare metal operator pod, specifically with the DHCP. So that's something we'd love to discuss, especially with the guys from Red Hat, right? Because I understood from the previous discussion that that you have somehow some solutions for part of the problem. Then we are also working on the control plane load balancer, like trying to figure out a solution to deploy the load balancer on the nodes at the same time as we're deploying the Kubernetes node. So basically looking into right now into having a KeepAliveD and an HA proxy on all the masters. The HA proxy then redistributing the load over the different like API server. And we are having some issues with the kind of chicken and egg problem of like how to get the HA proxy set up and reconfigured to have all the node every time that there is a change on each of the nodes. And then we are also looking into maybe like doing some IP allocation management for the nodes. We have a use case where we won't have any DHCP or anything on the network, so we are looking into like maybe like modifying or how we can use CapBPK to be able to also like handle the IP address allocation on this. Yeah, I will summarize this in the notes right after when we go through the next item. And yeah, about the CapVM v1-alpha2 branch, we are now like thinking of like merging it. So I don't really know how we should do that. Just open a PR, I guess, and get going, and then that would mean that maybe Russell would need to do the creation of the v1-alpha1 branch, right?
Yeah, I haven't created the v1-alpha1 branch yet. I mean, it'd be trivial to do so. It's just, I guess it'd be a little extra work to do it early. But as soon as we're ready to merge, I'll create it. And then in terms of when to merge to master, I'm ready to do it whenever you say you're ready to do it. We need to work out to make sure if there's any conflicts between changes that we've made in master since. I don't think there's been very many changes. So
yeah, we've been trying to keep it quite up to date, like to pull in all the changes like one after the other. There has only been one recently, beginning of the week, that we need to rebase on, but otherwise like
okay.
It's gonna be pretty straightforward.
All right. Yeah. So other than that, to me, it's mostly from my perspective, it's just working out Git mechanics to make sure we have a good merge, and then whenever you say it's time, and then I'm ready to help do it. I don't know what I need to do. I guess I can create the branch, and I'll take a look at the PR. If there's some reason that a PR doesn't work well because it's too big or something, then we can just merge it, manually and not go through a GitHub PR. I don't know. Just let me know what you see when you look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Then it might still need like 1 or 2 days before we open the PR, but then we'll put it on the we'll put it on the Slack channel. Good. Okay. So let's maybe move to next point.
Yes, I think that was my one about networking, and it's actually there's a discussion with Dan in the chat, which kind of goes back to your comment about the load balancer integration, and it seems like that's definitely a good thing to collaborate on. We've got something very similar in the OpenShift integration of Metal3, which uses KeepAliveD and HA proxy. We've also got the IPAN problem to solve, which it would be great to solve in a common way. It seems like it would be good to avoid embedding that in the Metal3 implementation, so that it's just a common implementation that could be reused, and also there's going to be cases where there's external load balancers and stuff like that. So that seems like maybe something we could get into in a bit more detail on another call. But yeah, the item I had on the task list is related to that. I've started looking at more complex networking scenarios where you have multiple networks connected to the worker nodes for specific workloads, and also the potential for running multiple clusters on a single development host. And so, yeah, I made a start on that yesterday, basically just to adjust the Ansible roles to allow us to specify the networks via a variable. Probably going to do a bit more work on that. The defaults will just be the same as they are now. But yeah, the idea was to make scenarios a bit easier And then the other thing, which I think is mostly complete now, apart from the Metal3 devenv PR, which maybe Stephen would like to talk about, is because he's done most of the work lately, which is the IPv6 support.
Sure, I can talk about that. So we've got the support already landed in the ironic images for IPv6. So with a environment variable, it will do all the right things to listen on IPv6 addresses. There's a Metal3 devenv PR that's hopefully ready to merge once CI passes. I gotta make sure that I didn't break anything because it looks like CI is still failing. But yeah, that's basically where things are now. And then I guess I could briefly talk about the other thing I'm working on, which is the next item after Russell's, which is external DHCP support. So today, Metal3 devenv kind of assumes that you want to run DNS mask in the cluster. But if you're using something like Infoblox or some other external DHCP, we want a way to turn that off. So there's a PR open now to Ironic to have a way to disable that. And then once that's good to go, I'll expose that in the devenv stuff. That's about it.
Okay, great. And please, if you can add a small summary on the minutes of what you've been talking about, it would be great. Thanks.
Yeah. So what I've been looking at IPv6 as well, though not so much the Metal3 parts. I've been looking at everything else with Kubernetes, with OpenShift in particular. So that's kind of been what I've been doing most recently. Before that, not so long ago, I set up the Prow cluster, and I just figured I'd mention it. I'm not really doing anything actively on that, or other than just checking in on it and upgrading it occasionally. But just wanted to raise it in case no one has mentioned any problems with it. But if there are any problems, please let me know, because I intend to help maintain it for now. Also, if anyone else is interested in helping maintain it, then or work on it or add stuff, then let me know. There is a Git repo with almost everything you can just do by PRs to a Git repo that has all the config in it. But I can also give access to the cluster itself if anyone's interested. But yeah, mainly I'm just trying to make sure that stays working well. I think that's all I really want to say there. Just let me know if anyone has seen problems that I haven't talked to me about.
Great, thank you. Dmitry, then?
Yeah, I was working primarily on this. This may be kind of somehow related to the networking configuration in terms of cluster API, but I would like to extend the bare metal host with the network data JSON that's supported by Cloud Init. Actually, I have provided the PR, and for that, link is also attached to the agenda. So basically, there was a kind of long discussion inside of this PR, even in terms of what we wanted to support in terms of the host configuration data. And I guess we may kind of start to try to kind of discuss this on this one more time on this call. But I guess the final decision was to have like 3 sort of abstract configuration parameters like metadata, user data, and the network data, and those parameters may depend on particular implementation of deployment system of the image. For example, for clouding it may be one format, for the ignition maybe another format, but in general, I guess we need like these 3 parameters to be supported by bare metal host object inside of the Kubernetes. That's mostly it from me that I would like to share. And maybe if someone has some like vision and opinions, and like if someone can review the PR, it would be nice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have reached the end of our small agenda for now already. First, would anybody have anything to add to this to the agenda. Yeah, please go on. Meanwhile, we can like go quickly back to the votes. So there was every other week has now like quite much all of the votes. So let's make it every other week, meaning that we're gonna have one more meeting before the Christmas holidays. So not next week, but the following one. And then for the restarting at the beginning of next year, we can like discuss this in the following meeting to see if people would be available on the first week of January or if it should be the following one. And then about the timing, well, unfortunately, Sudip, only one person would like to postpone it by an hour. So I guess like for now we can keep the current time and then see if later on we need to reschedule. That's always open.
Yeah, that's fine, Mail. I just have one more agenda point. I have not written it there, but just wanted to discuss. Is it possible to like have some steps for a beginner development effort, like that can act as a guide for those who want to contribute towards the code and want to do some pull requests? So certain like basic criteria, knowledge of Go and Cube Builder and things like that. Is it possible to add something like that which can help many?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the more documentation, the better on pretty much all topics, whether and anything that would make it easier to get involved and get things working and contribute is certainly something that I think we should have. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, you're actually the perfect kind of person to help get it written, whether you write it or help us figure out what to write, all that stuff. So it's like we have some things, and so first, we can talk about what exists, make sure you've seen what does exist. And then second, as you ask more questions, if you take note of, here's the things I wish I had known or wish I, had been laid out in the document for me, like that's, as you go through the ramp up, then that helps frame what we should put in a document. So, your feedback on what you wish was documented is very helpful. In terms of what exists, the first thing I always point people to is the Metal3 dev env repository. So have you seen that repository?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay,
of course.
yeah.
I use that to build it also. Yeah, right.
Okay, great. I mean, that's basically the main thing we have, that and the associated try it documentation that's on the website. That's roughly what we have, because from there, that's just kind of a common get an environment running and here's some scenarios you can try. From there, it's sort of, well, now what do you want to do? Like what do you wish was there? And so it depends on whether you already have an existing feature or bug or whatever it is that you want, or then it's trawling through the GitHub issues and so forth, look for something that's marked as a to-do item that isn't being worked on. So the next question is there something you'd like to accomplish, or is there, or are you looking for some guidance on, could someone point out a good first project to work on? Like, what's your next stage?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Okay.
All right. Well, feel free to reach out if we can help. Our Slack channel or the mailing list are both good places anytime to ask questions. And try to help
Okay,
you all.
thank you. Yeah.
We could also maybe like make a stronger use of the good first issue labels on GitHub. On any of the projects.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I'm taking that as a note.
And of course, feel free to reach any of us on the Slack channel or like directly if you wish.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mel.
Okay. Any other point to discuss? well, then I guess we have done it like quite fast. We could, so from here we could either like start discussing a bit more like some technical things that we have already mentioned in the previous point discussion. Like for us, for example, we would be really interested into discussing further a bit the load balancer and the pivoting things. So maybe like of course, if you have any other things that you would want to go like technically a bit deeper in the discussion with some other members, please add it there, and I guess we can take the remaining time to discuss on this. Right, so feel free to add it there.
All right. The first one, you mentioned pivoting challenges. I'm going to try and remember back. We started having a conversation about this one on Slack, and the challenge being how to pivot the bare metal operator. And one of the challenges in particular is around the DHCP server and addressing.
Yes, exactly.
So I think the other Red Hat folks that are on help me like describe this, if whatever I forget or get wrong, but I know, and I think we may have put a link in Slack to where you can find like the YAML for the deployment. But we have a couple of containers. One of them, I think it's like this. It's called like a static IP manager or something. It's kind of a hack. I don't know. I mean, it works though. It runs a bash script that sets a static IP address on the interface, and I think that runs as an init container and ensures that the interface has the particular address set on it. But there's also a timeout on the address. So like if the pod dies, the address will automatically go away. And then there's a container, like a refresh static IP container that runs, like one of the containers that runs in the pod, and that's running in a loop, sort of refreshing the IP address, because like I said, it's set to timeout to make sure that the IP address stays. So if the bare metal operator pod dies and it gets started somewhere else, that address will time out on the interface, and then those containers will pick up and set it on whatever, wherever it runs elsewhere. So whether that's a different host within the same cluster, or you're moving it entirely from one cluster to another, we ensure that whatever host it's running on, that address sort of goes away. So that's the current approach. There are there's some major caveats to that. The major one is, this is for the provisioning network. There is no state kept around from the DHCP server. In practice, this has roughly been, I don't know, good enough so far, because the addresses are, at least in our use case, the addresses on that network are only used during provisioning. We don't use those addresses after provisioning. And since there's no state kept around, the addresses aren't stable. It's even possible to hand out the address more than once technically, although since it's sort of only at provisioning time, unless something happening a lot, it's less likely. I'd definitely like to improve that and come up with a solution where at least our state on DHCP leases is stable and kept around, so that we at least eliminate the problem where we might hand out the same address more than once. But at least we have a known address that's used for the DHCP server, no matter where it's running, and it's not too bad. So that's roughly a summary of, I think, what we're doing at the moment. Steve or
yeah. So I was just going to add like a follow up to Russell's summary of the current implementation, which is that I have actually been looking at an alternative, which would be to use Keep LiveD and another virtual IP for the provisioning network. And the main time that's helpful is if you need to retrieve any data when bootstrapping the masters from whatever you use to bootstrap them. So in the OpenShift case, there's a bootstrap cluster that is used to do the initial deployment of the masters, and that's just a single node. And there's some data that we need to retrieve. We're not using Cloud Init, but we use a tool called Ignition, and we need to retrieve the configuration from there. And so In that case, the reason we get away with it with the static IP approach Russell described at the moment is we have two different IP addresses. That Bootstrap VM comes up with a certain IP address that is known on the provisioning network, and then after the masters come up, a different IP comes up with the Metal3 provisioning services. I think in the case where you need to pivot from one to the other, probably the virtual IP is going to be a preferable solution, but we haven't made that switch yet. So I know, Mael, you mentioned that that's something you've been looking into. Potentially we can collaborate on that. I mean, we've already used a similar approach for the control plane virtual IP, so pretty confident it should work fine. It's just a question of wiring in that implementation.
Yeah, we're definitely going to give it a try with the skipper ID. And another problem that we were actually hitting is the fact that when you're moving it from the ephemeral node to the target cluster, the networking configuration on the host might be quite completely different. So we'll need to make the DHCP server bind on an interface that is not the same on the two of them. So we're also looking into how maybe we could identify the interface based on the IP address, or then just update the config map when we are pivoting, so that we give the new config map with the interface. But this second approach is a bit problematic for us, because let's say if you have multiple nodes where this DHCP pod could end up. Let's say if one of them goes away, then it's going to be rescheduled on another one that might have a different network setup, right? So we would definitely prefer to go with this kind of keep alive the mechanism, but where we would identify the interface that we would be using for keep alive the and for the DHCP binding by checking what IP address is on that node. But that means that we need to keep those IP addresses around all the time, and we can't just consider them give them and throw them away as soon as we are done using them, as you are doing it in OpenShift apparently.
Yeah, I think it's going to be much easier in the case where you've got persistent leases from an external DHCP server. But yeah, we don't have that obviously for the hosted DHCP solution. As Stephen mentioned earlier, I think probably the first step for the work we're currently doing will be to turn off that hosted DHCP server and rely on an external DHCP where the leases, the reservations could be made persistent. But it would be good to solve it for the hosted DHCP case as well.
In our use case, we're talking about a setup where everything needs to be self-contained. So it will need to be embedded in the contained in the cluster. So we need to find a solution to be able to pivot this.
I'm not sure if Doug has yet joined the call. We did discuss this a while ago, and he had an interesting idea, which was at the point where we make the first lease, that we basically adjust the DNS mask configuration to make that sticky. We could add that IP to the bare metal host at that point. We didn't get as far as actually prototyping it, but there may be a few options there where basically we would need to watch the leases that get handed out and then persist them by reloading the DNS mask configuration.
Another thing we've been trying to give it a shot. It was based on an idea. I think it was by Doug or Russell. I don't recall exactly that. Maybe that we could make the DHCP container completely stateless if all the information about the leases are stored as in an object in the API server. Then we would just move that object during the pivoting, and then when restarting the DNS mask on the other side, then it would just directly use this pivoted object basically. But that would mean that we need to implement a DHCP that does this kind of controller that would be behaving as a DHCP.
So basically what we need is IP address management stuff, something like that in this case.
Yes, we can transfer from the ephemeral node to the target cluster.
Yeah, hey, this is Doug. Sorry I joined late. I had an internal meeting. Yeah, I looked at this a while back and found a couple of different IPAM solutions, the IP management solutions. And I also found several different implementations of DHCP servers in Go, which could be bolted onto the operator or some other component. You know, we could run it standalone or something. And that doing something like that would let us, like Mel was saying, use CRDs to host the binding between a given host object and the IP address that we want for it.
Yeah, it's pretty much an open question on our side, but we're definitely like giving it a thought and like trying to do something there. Yeah. Okay, great. If there's no more comments, we can like then talk about a bit the load balancer, and because I know that, so Dan, you're on the call, right? Like you were also interested in this, like how to do the load balancing on the bare metal cluster.
Yeah, that's correct. I've kind of had a go at writing my own bare metal cluster API provider a while ago, and then kind of actually found that one already kind of existed, but it's definitely been the IPAM solution as well. I was looking at implementing a controller to actually have a second set of IP address management that would exist inside the Kubernetes cluster. Pivoting is not really something that I've kind of been focused on looking at so far. I'm kind of getting a feel as best I can from the community in terms of how much priority I guess people are kind of focusing on in terms of pivoting. So, you know, I guess turning up to a data center with something running on your laptop and firing clusters into a brand new data center and things like that. But the load balancing question has kind of come up in a few different providers as well. So things like the Cluster API VMware, which doesn't come with a load balancer out of the box as well. So and no one really, the Cluster API project from a higher level perspective doesn't really seem to have a definitive answer in terms of which is the best way to go. So I know there's been conversation to look at whether there becomes a load balancer type that sits next to clusters, machines, etc. But it's still kind of a bit up in the air. You're on mute.
Sorry, my bad. Even if this is ongoing work in V1 FS3, we're kind of like maybe we still want to have a solution already that could work with what we have in V1 FS2 right now. For this, like, I don't know if we should go in the direction of like having some kind of solution recommended, like a Metal Cube approved kind of like setup for the bare metal operator, or if we should for the load balancer, or if we should just completely leave it free to the user to like pass any configuration he wants on in the KubeADM config. But if we like, we definitely want to come up with kind of a solution that would be working for as many like use cases as we can cover, and for this, like what we've been looking into right now, like the having a keep alive D running on the host, and then HA proxy as a daemon set, or like any kind of like load balancer as a daemon set, seems to be the best option for us. The only issue with this is the chicken and egg problem. Like, how do you start a daemon set without having a Kubernetes cluster, right? So we're just like now we have a kind of a hack that we would basically like create an IP tables redirect rule, so that like the traffic that would be going otherwise to the load balancer on the first master would actually be redirected to the actual API server. until the daemon set comes up, at which point we would like be removing the redirect rule. But it's kind of a bit of a hack in that direction.
So, specific solution aside, you also asked, you know, in the project, should we have something built in? Should we not? What should we do? I think as we move into supporting full cluster provisioning through your team's work on V1 Alpha 2 support, I think it does make sense to have something. Roughly, I think having like something, two things, like one, a built-in solution that works for a lot of use cases, but then also have the ability to turn it off to do your own thing. Like I think that's roughly, I think that should be our goal. Have something built in, but also make it possible for people to do their own thing. Obviously, a super common use case is going to be, I don't want your built-in load balancing. I want to use my external load balancer, so we have to be able to support that. But I think having something built in is really nice. And you talk about keep alive DNHA proxy. That's what we're using right now in our OpenShift integration. I am trying to remember that got implemented a while ago. I'm trying to remember in detail how it works, other than knowing it's those components. Steve Hardy, I don't know if
we basically have an operator that consumes some config data from the Bootstrap host, and that's the bootstrapping problem I mentioned earlier on. That's part of where that data comes from. We have some manifests that specify what to start, and then we just create some static pods. So it's not actually running as a daemon set for HA proxy. That could maybe be an improvement. It's just static pods at the moment.
Well, static pods also lets us do that at like creation of the machine at that time versus having to wait for the API server come up and then create it for the API server. We just created it at provisioning time, which maybe does help.
Okay, and if you're like so doing it with a static pod, then how do you handle the changes in the infrastructure? Like when you have a new node, or like a node that goes away, and then you somehow need to reconfigure your load balancer.
It's a good question. I think the static pod has a sidecar container that's refreshing the configuration. So it's every so often, I don't know what, whatever timer it is checking the API for what the current set of targets should be, and updates the config. I'm happy to dig up that config and share it. It's it's all on GitHub somewhere.
We would be really interested if it's possible to get to see like how this is done, because this is really what we're tackling right now.
Sure, I will look now, but we can at least put it as an action to take up these references to share it.
Sure. Okay, shall I put it in the minutes, or it's just going to be outside of the?
Yeah, we can have it in the minutes. Yeah, I just got to find the links. I'll drop the links in here once I find the right one.
Okay.
So many reposts.
Thanks a lot for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody has anything to add on this, like load balancing?
I think there is.
Or Red Hat.
I feel like there is one other little detail about this where there's like an IP tables rule that I think. Gosh, I'm trying to remember how it works. There is one like IP tables thing that makes this work as well. I'm trying to remember what it is.
Okay. Yeah,
Steve, do you remember? I know there was some IP tables config to make this work as well. Do you happen to remember what it was? If not, I'll look it up and put it in these notes too.
No, I don't remember that. I've just found the manifest in the machine config operator repo, so I'll put that in the doc. But maybe we can follow up on Slack with the remaining details. Not looked at this in a while.
Okay.
Just a comment on the static pods. So kubeADM uses static pods to basically bring up the API server, etcd, various things on a node during the initialization phase, at least for the control plane node. That might be a model worth taking a look at. I'm not entirely sure, but I wonder if it's possible to enhance the kubeadm init flow to also do load balancing. But it does use static pods today for itself.
And we would anyways then need the sidecar container to like do the updating of the config.
Yeah, I don't know about that stuff, but I'm just saying the kubeadm to initialize the control plane node today makes use of static pods. And I'd be curious, I haven't looked into it, but if it's possible to extend that to do load balancing, it would be my suggestion.
It does seem like the hosted load balancer probably shouldn't be specific to Metal3, because if you're on a private cloud that doesn't have load balancer as a service, for example, you probably are going to want the same kind of solution. The IPAM for the provisioning network, maybe that is more Metal3 specific, but it seems like it would be good if we can come up with a way to make sure it's not coupled only to bare metal deployments.
Okay. Anything else on the load balancer topic?
There's a project that I'm sure you guys know about it called Metal3, targeted at, I think, bare metal deployments. It's been around for a while. You could take a look at that as well, but I mean, that's just an option, right, for load balancing. It's not necessarily solving the problem we're discussing here.
I think this gives us the chicken and egg problem in that it needs a cluster in the first place.
Is this Metal3 the one that uses the BGP routes to do the load balancing? Then you need a BGP listener somewhere, right? Like your router or.
Sure. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm sure people know about this project already, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem that we're talking about here. It's just an option for load balancing on bare metal clusters.
It does actually have an L2 only option, which basically just uses kubeproxy, but it doesn't require BGP.
Okay. Then if we're done with the load balancing, has anybody another point that want to be discussed? Otherwise, I could have one also to provide again.
Okay, I was curious. Sorry. I was curious about the provider ID problem. I think you had mentioned it earlier, not in this meeting, but I think on Slack somewhere. Has that been looked at or addressed?
Yes, it has been addressed. So we have two ways to do things now. So we didn't go at all for now in the bare metal cloud provider kind of thing that we have been discussing. So we still run without a cloud provider. To set the provider ID itself, you can pass it as an extra arg. So you can give like in the kubelet configuration in the kubeadm config, you can give the provider ID as an extra arg. So that's what we are doing right now, like giving the directly, basically when we are creating the kubeadm config, we template this provider ID with whatever comes from the metadata from Ironic. There's a field called UID that has now been modified to be the bare metal host ID. So that's the one that we use with this Jinja template feature of Cloud Init. So that's the first, the best way I think that we solved this issue. The second thing that has been implemented is that the CapBM is now able to directly go on the target cluster and then filter the nodes by labels to find out the one that is labeled with the UID of the bare metal host that is associated with the bare metal machine we're working on, and then sets the provider ID directly there from the ephemeral cluster, let's say. But this approach is more like a hack than what is done with the Jinja template of Cloud Init.
I see. So if I understand correctly, you're saying that the kubeadm config itself is modified. This is the kubeadm config in the bootstrap provider, kubeadm.
Yes.
I see. And that which ends up on the node through Cloud Init. There's also another option. So I remember, and I can look up the details on this. So kubeadm supports passing in these extra arguments through a file. So you can pass, to kubelet or the API server, etc. You can pass in additional configurations that are read from a particular location on the file system. That may or may not, be cleaner. I'm trying to think if through like a Cloud Init type approach, if it's better to just put that, this extra provider ID XYZ in that file. But yes, if you're interested, I can look that up. It's a very easy hack as well.
We would still need to template it from the Cloud Init, right? So whether we template the kubeadm config, the YAML file, or we template that file would actually be pretty much equivalent, no?
Yeah, or template, or I think it's a static, it's just a simple text file, right? It's not a complicated file necessarily. And it would not require you to modify the kubeadm config. Whichever is easier, I suppose, in the end. I mean, here you're just modifying a particular file, you're adding extra line on it, versus, templating a kube config at the very top level at the operators, at the CRD level, basically, I should say.
Yeah, but we actually doing it at the CR, like in the CR itself, is probably going to be a bit more difficult because the in that case when the because what we're giving for provider ID is the bare metal host ID, right? So it comes actually from the ironic metadata that is put on the node when the node is boot up. If we want to have it in the CR, that might be a bit more tricky already. So like I would expect the templating to be actually the easiest way to get that that ID somewhere.
Okay, we can take this offline if people are interested, but I think I misunderstood what you said then, when you said you templated at the kube config itself, kubeadm config itself.
We didn't template the, okay, like we basically just put a field in the kubeadm config that with this Jinja, like curly brackets, and then like ds.metadata. We called it UID, I think. Yeah.
Ah, I see. The very initial kubeadm config passed as input to the bootstrap provider.
Exactly. So the templating, like when Jinja runs, is actually on the host when booting up the node, basically.
Okay, I misunderstood that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're reaching a time, so we're reaching the end of this meeting. So well, let's close it right now, and then the next meeting will be on Wednesday. Well, when would that be exactly? On Wednesday, 18th of December, same time as today. Okay, so thanks for joining. I will put the recording online, like probably on YouTube, like Cluster API does, as soon as I can. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.